Greetings, Stage of Bliss. This video is about falling in love with the dark side in order to access the full potentiality. Now, when you first say falling in love with the darkness, that doesn't sound appealing to most people. Most people are trying to bring more light into their life and lighten up and feel better and happier and release emotions that have been bogging them down. And even the work that I've been doing over the past few years has been largely focused on releasing trapped, unprocessed negative emotions. But the key that I'm talking about and I'm working into right now, and it's perfect that I've had a black eye for like the last 2 weeks, because it really is about looking into the black. Now, when we label things as black and white, as good and bad, and we take duality along for the ride, then we miss also the elements of the known versus the unknown. And when we speak about it in this way, from like the wild woman archetype or the feminine versus masculine, when we go in that door, instead of the negative positive emotion door. When we enter that way, many of us are familiar and recognize and even say to embrace this idea that the feminine is the unknown and that we are only in about 3% of reality in the known, which is very, masculine in its manifestation. And yet, this is like a tantric sort of twisty definition as well, because in the higher realms, actually the feminine is the manifest form and the masculine is holding the space. And yet in our manifest reality, the definition of understanding this is in the reverse because we're in a mirror. Therefore, the known is thought to be masculine and the unknown feminine, mysterious. We relate that in that way. So what this also tells me is, anything that can be talked about in the mirror form, it's not really true, but we use it as a tool of perspective. So we're putting on this tool of 3D definitions and we're saying, okay, the feminine is that part of reality I don't know. It's the darkness, it's the mystery, it's the unknown, unaccessed parts of consciousness. And the masculine has been thought of as the light or the illuminated, even this, the Krishna and the Christ consciousness language talks about this masculine version of light, bringing light in where there was dark and illuminating it. And most religions and churches have been built around this idea of wanting the illumination because we relate that with knowledge and we relate that with goodness and being aware and being, we relate that with love. And when we do that, then we really cleave to the one thing. And then the mystery schools and so forth, including like, those who worship the quote dark side, Luciferians or, satanic worshipers, it's sort of a twisted reality because the dark represents that which doesn't have light, but it also represents the mystery and the depths and the unknown. And this is where these things have been tangled in like church language and keeping people repelled from looking into the darkness has been this sort of twist in our consciousness that if you look in the darkness, you must be a devil worshiper, and then the idea that the devil is opposite God came in through the church instead of looking at, even the word Lucifer means the, the morning star. Okay. And so this twisting on the words and reality has led us to be afraid of or repelling the darkness or the unknown, even though that leaves us only, like science-wise, if you look at science and quantum mechanics, we're only existing then in 3%. And this is reflected so many times in the world that also those who have the most money are in the top, 3 to 1%, where you have like 97, 99% of the people with little. So that also is representative of the fact that we are really only we see only the abundance that is in about 1 to 3% of reality. The rest is not illuminated to us. The rest is hidden in the dark corners, in the dark matter, in the unexplored regions, not only of space, but of our own subconscious, of our own being. Every single cell in the DNA, too, it's like we only have like this splicing. We can only see that much. The light is only hitting that much. So that much has only ever been illuminated to our knowledge. The rest and the work of those on the cutting edge, which I consider myself included, is to start turning the unknown into the known, and then to begin to access what has previously been unknowable. So, have you ever played that game Othello, where you have like the black and the white chips, and your goal is to like flip all the chips over to your color? It's kind of like we're in this part where almost all the chips are black. That's the unknowable and the unknown. And there's just like 3 white chips left, but suddenly white chip like gets on the other side of a black chip and starts like flipping chips. So now we're flipping the board, I feel like, in this time, this where we say, the 100th monkey or the tipping point is that point at the yin and yang. We're about to flip to mostly the illuminated. So in order to do that, we have to kind of lean into or go into or accept that the black chips are part of the board, and we're going to flip them by accessing their unyielded potential, which means we have to go there. We have to like dive into the dark. We have to fall in love with the darkness. We have to embrace, make love to, merge with in order to flip that chip. So every time we go into an emotion and we don't want to look at it, or we want to just put it over here as not being desirable, we keep that chip black. One thing I've enjoyed about the work I've done in this past few years with accessing and releasing trapped emotions is, even though it's not necessarily in the same manner that I'm looking at doing it now, there is an aspect of that where you suddenly become aware of the fact that you had a trapped emotion, and that process alone, that consciousness, flips the chip. So you can now appreciate that you had that and you can own it. And that's, I think, what helps it to release its charge. So I'm also looking at right now all of the parts in life and in reality where we haven't wanted to go. There might be things that repeatedly, when we get to the edge of that thing, we're like, yeah, I'm not going any farther than that. Or, yeah, that's the edge for me. Or, if you want to do that, that's fine, but that's just not for me. Those are the edges of where the unknown and the unknowable is for us personally. And I think what's being asked, at least of me, I feel this, and I feel this is probably true across the board, is what's your one thing? And maybe you've just completed it. I think it's like a completion task, possibly. What's that thing where you're like, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to bring consciousness into that thing that I haven't wanted to, or I haven't wanted to look at, or I've been looking away from, and I'm going to flip that chip. I'm going to bring consciousness to it. Now, we can each just flip a chip, and that is probably cool enough if we just flip a chip, but then some people might not flip chips for a really long time. So then we're like hanging out with only like half flipped, and we really all want to flip all the chips so we can experience that age of enlightenment, so to speak, a golden era where we have illumination and we get to like play and craft and create in that illuminated space. So right now we're being invited to maybe flip more than our fair of chips, if that makes sense. Like, you only really have to flip one chip. Like, what's your hardest chip, and flip it. Like, look at something that you don't want to look at, embrace it, love it, own it. Chip flipped, like But if there's a lot of those things in your reality, you probably are a front runner. You probably are a first waver. And the reason why you have so many chips that you're like, I don't know that chip, no. And you consider yourself strong for not going there, but I'm recommending that you have a lot of chips that bug you, that are triggers or that are things you haven't wanted to go into, because you can flip many chips for the whole. So remember the game Othello, and we want to flip like the whole board to white, and it's like my understanding before this has been like, well, we actually have to have black and white, in order to merge and like for the game to flip. But now I'm realizing we do have black and white in every scenario. There is a duality. There is that chip is half white and half black, and we've just been playing the black side of all of them. And even when we flip them all to white, they still all have a black part on the underneath that we've already looked at. So the reason why it can become white is because we've looked at it and we've embraced it and we've flipped it. And because we're the game players and those are the pieces of us, we get to now flip all the chips to white. So maybe this is just me coming into this awareness that we're like in this massive Othello game and the front runners are like the big chip flippers, and it's time to flip like all the chips as fast as we can. And that means we have to go into our deepest, darkest places where we haven't wanted to, and we have to own those things, and we have to embrace those things and love those things until they flip. And some of them are going to immediately flip, and some of them are not going to. But if we walk away from them, they won't flip, because who's going to flip them? Like, we'll literally have to wait till our kids look at them and flip them. And if we don't have kids, or our kids are young, like that could be a while before they flip those chips for us. So we're doing it because our parents didn't flip those chips, and maybe those chips weren't even flippable at the time that they were around, and they've just now become like all black chips. Like we're in so much of that it's time to, reverse the reversal and flip the chip. So embrace the darkness, embracing the fear. Look at those things that petrify you, in relationship with your kids, in your job, like what you're worried about or think you can't do, or this just being too overwhelming for you, and go, you know what? I'm taking that on until I flip it. And that's your job. Like your job is to flip it. So if you're doing anything else, or if you've already been in some region, now this is where I'm feeling like I'm getting called, and this might be a totally new, other video, but if you're being called into another region, maybe you flipped so many chips in this area, universe is like, that's great. We have this whole other field of chips that you'd be really good at, and now we're going to call you over there. So flip chip flipping duty has been redirected. So that could be you.